All right, so today we're diving deep into Jungian archetypes.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, we're going to unpack these 12 universal patterns of behavior that Jung identified.
Right.
Think of them as like blueprints for personality, and they pop up everywhere,
Oh, yeah.
in myths and movies and even, in ourselves.
It's true. What's so fascinating about archetypes is that they offer a framework for understanding human motivation and behavior patterns. It's like a psychological Rosetta Stone
Ooh, I like that.
for the human experience.
Okay, so instead of just listing these archetypes,
Right.
let's bring them to life,
Okay.
starting with this idea of the collective unconscious.
Yes.
So it's like this massive shared pool of experiences, symbols, kind of like a wellspring we all tap into.
Exactly. Jung believed that this part of the psyche isn't formed by personal experience, but rather inherited.
Okay.
It's a vast, universal library of symbols and patterns of behavior.
So we're all born with this like archetype starter kit inside us.
You could say that. And as we move through life, certain archetypes
Right.
become more dominant in our personalities,
Yeah.
shaping how we see the world and how we interact with others.
So that's where those 4 cardinal orientations come in, right?
Right.
These are like the driving forces behind each archetype. The why behind the what.
Exactly. They act as a compass,
Okay.
guiding the archetypes towards their core desires and motivations.
So like the ego orientation
Yes.
drives archetypes like the hero and the magician
Right.
who yearn to leave their mark on the world.
They want to make a difference.
Yeah, then there's like the order orientation, which is all about structure and stability.
Exactly.
You got the caregiver, the ruler.
Right. Systems and control.
Yeah. And then you can't forget about the social orientation.
Right.
So that's like the lover and the jester.
Bringing people together.
Yeah, that need for connection, belonging.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you have that freedom orientation.
Yeah.
So that's the innocent, the sage, and the explorer, the
Breaking boundaries, seeking truth.
Yeah.
They want to explore.
Exactly. So each of these orientations kind of houses these 3 archetypes
Yes.
that resonate with these specific motivations.
Right.
Okay, so let's jump into exploring these 12 archetypes in detail.
Okay.
First up, the hero.
Classic.
What really defines a hero?
Yeah.
Is it more than just, physical strength and bravery?
Absolutely. Think of Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
He embodies moral courage,
Right.
standing up for what's right despite the personal risk.
So it's more about, like, taking on those challenges.
Exactly.
Even if there's a personal cost.
Confronting challenges head on.
But even heroes have their weaknesses, right?
Oh, of course.
Isn't there classic downfall hubris, that excessive pride?
Exactly. Think about Icarus.
Oh, yeah.
Flying too close to the sun.
Right.
It's a cautionary tale
Yeah.
for the hero, reminding us that even the bravest
Yeah.
can be blinded by their own ambition.
Okay, next up we have,
The magician?
what sets this archetype apart?
Well, the magician is all about transformation
Okay.
and innovation.
Right.
They see potential where others see limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Think Steve Jobs revolutionizing the tech industry.
Yeah, okay.
But there's a shadow side to the magician as well.
I can see that this kind of drive for innovation can lead to manipulation.
Yes.
It's important to kind of question the magician's motives, right?
Precisely.
Make sure they're not just using their power for bad.
The magician archetype reminds us that progress can come at a cost,
Yeah.
and that wielding power responsibly is crucial.
Okay, speaking of challenging norms,
Right.
let's talk about the rebel.
The rebel.
So they're all about disrupting the status quo.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Think about figures like Rosa Parks, Che Guevara.
Okay.
They fought for change, even if it meant going against the grain.
Right.
However, this rebellious energy needs to be channeled correctly.
Otherwise, it can lead to chaos and destruction, right?
Exactly.
It's a fine line
It-
for the rebel to walk.
For sure.
Now on a more nurturing note,
Okay.
let's talk about the caregiver.
The caregiver.
This archetype seems pretty straightforward, right?
The caregiver is driven by compassion,
Okay.
a deep desire to nurture others.
Yeah.
Figures like Mother Teresa, Florence Nightingale
Right, selfless.
embody this selflessness,
Yeah.
but there's a hidden danger for this archetype.
And that is,
Burnout.
oh, that makes sense.
It's constant giving without receiving.
Yeah, they forget to take care of themselves.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a reminder that self-care isn't selfish.
Yeah.
It's essential
Right.
for anyone in a caring role.
So shifting gears to more of an authoritative figure.
Okay.
Let's talk about the ruler.
The ruler.
So from Julius Caesar to, modern day leaders,
Right.
This archetype is about control, responsibility,
Yes.
but doesn't power corrupt.
It can.
Right.
The ruler archetype highlights the challenges of wielding authority responsibly.
Yeah.
It's a tightrope walk between maintaining order and becoming tyrannical.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Speaking of figures who leave their mark,
Yeah.
what about the creator archetype?
Yes.
Leonardo da Vinci comes to mind.
Creators are driven by this insatiable need
Okay.
to bring something new into the world,
Right.
to leave behind a legacy. However, even the most brilliant creators often struggle with self-doubt and perfectionism.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it seems like this creative drive can be both a blessing and a curse.
It can.
Okay, moving on to an archetype we can all relate to, the lover.
The lover.
It's not just about romance, right?
Not at all.
It embodies this passion,
Yes.
this desire for connection.
Think about Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Intense, all-consuming love.
Yeah.
However, the lover can become too dependent on others
Okay.
for validation and happiness.
Right. So healthy love
Yeah.
requires self-love,
Yes.
a sense of individuality as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to the jester, that archetype of humor
Yeah.
and lightheartedness.
Think Robin Williams' gestures bring joy and laughter, helping us not take life too seriously.
Yeah.
But sometimes even the jester needs to confront difficult emotions and situations.
It's like that saying,
Yeah.
behind every mask, there's a face, and behind that, a soul.
Exactly.
Jesters have depth, too.
They do.
So let's talk about the citizen,
The citizen.
that archetype of community and belonging.
The citizen craves acceptance and connection,
Okay.
working toward the common good.
Mhm.
However, this desire to belong
Yeah.
can lead to conformity,
Right.
a loss of individuality.
We all want to fit in,
Right?
but the citizen reminds us that authenticity is important.
Yes.
Don't lose yourself in the crowd.
Don't lose yourself.
Okay, what about the innocent?
The innocent.
They seem to have this childlike wonder about the world.
Yes, think of Dorothy
Okay.
in The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Wide-eyed optimism.
Mm-hmm.
The innocent sees the good in everything, which is beautiful, but naivete can make them vulnerable.
It seems like innocence needs to be tempered with wisdom.
It does.
And speaking of wisdom, that brings us to the sage archetype.
The sage.
So sages, like Socrates,
Yes.
driven by a constant thirst for knowledge and understanding.
They want to know.
Yeah.
But this pursuit of wisdom can lead them to become detached from the practicalities of life.
Yeah, they get stuck in their heads
Yeah.
and forget about real-world applications.
Exactly.
And finally, we have the explorer,
The explorer.
always pushing boundaries, seeking new experiences.
Think Marco Polo,
Right.
venturing into uncharted territories.
Yeah.
That's the spirit of the explorer.
But this constant need for novelty
yes,
makes it difficult for them to settle down.
it can.
So it's a balancing act
It is.
between exploration and commitment.
Exactly.
So there you have it.
That's it.
The 12 Jungian archetypes.
Each with their own unique set of strengths,
Yes.
weaknesses, and motivations.
Wow, that was quite the rundown.
It was.
What are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember about these archetypes?
I think the most crucial thing to remember
Mhm.
is that these archetypes are not meant to be boxes.
Okay.
To categorize people.
Yeah.
They're tools for self-discovery and understanding.
Right.
The beauty is in recognizing these patterns
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to navigate life
More consciously.
more consciously. Yes.
So it's about recognizing the archetype's influence,
Yes.
but not letting it completely define us.
Exactly.
We're not just one archetype,
right.
but rather a blend of many,
A blend.
each contributing to this complexity of who we are.
That's a great way to put it.
So this has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious about something.
Oh.
We've talked about these archetypes as they show up in individuals,
Right.
but do they manifest in other areas of life as well?
Absolutely. Archetypes are reflected
Okay.
in a myriad of ways, from mythology and storytelling
Okay.
to branding and even cultural values.
That's fascinating.
Their influence is far-reaching
Okay.
and surprisingly pervasive.
I can't wait to explore those different manifestations
Yeah.
in more detail.
We'll delve into those in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Stay tuned. Welcome back.
All right, so last time we really unpacked, the basics of Jungian archetypes.
Right.
Explored that connection to the collective unconscious.
Yes.
And then we really got into, the unique characteristics of each of those archetypes.
Yeah, it was fascinating to see how those seemingly simple patterns of behavior can hold so much depth and complexity.
It's true.
And now we're going to take it a step further by exploring how these archetypes can manifest in other areas of life.
Right.
Beyond just the individual level.
So you mentioned branding and cultural values.
Yes.
How do archetypes kind of play out in those realms?
Well, think about branding for a moment.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how certain brands seem to have distinct personalities?
Yes, totally.
Some brands feel bold and adventurous,
Why?
while others seem more nurturing and family-oriented.
Yeah.
And that's often a deliberate strategy.
Oh, interesting.
Companies use archetypes to craft a specific image and connect with their target audience on a deeper, more emotional level.
So a brand might embody like the hero archetype to appeal to consumers who value courage and strength.
Exactly.
Like a sportswear company that kind of emphasizes like pushing limits.
Yes, achieving goals.
Right, exactly. Or a company might use like the jester archetype to create that sense of fun, lightheartedness.
Yes.
Like a snack brand that uses humor and playful packaging.
Exactly.
What about the sage archetype?
The sage.
I could see that being used by brands that want to position themselves as like the experts, the thought leaders.
Think about a tech company that emphasizes innovation, knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
By tapping into these deep-seated archetypal patterns, brands can create a sense of familiarity and resonance with their audience.
It's so clever.
It is.
It's amazing how these archetypes can be used strategically.
It's true.
To influence our perceptions and choices.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the enduring power of these universal patterns.
Okay, so branding is just one example.
It is.
Let's shift our focus to how these archetypes manifest in cultures.
Okay.
I'm curious about that.
Well, different cultures tend to value or emphasize certain archetypes more than others, shaping their collective beliefs and behaviors.
So a society that highly values tradition and hierarchy might place a greater emphasis on the ruler archetype.
The ruler.
Emphasizing order and authority.
Exactly. And leaders who embody those qualities would be revered and respected.
Right. Whereas a culture that prioritizes like individualism and self-expression might celebrate the rebel or the explorer archetypes.
Ones who challenge the norms and forge their own paths.
It's like these archetypes are a reflection of our shared values and aspirations.
Precisely.
And by understanding the dominant archetypes in a particular culture, we can gain insights into their worldview and their social dynamics.
Exactly.
This makes me think about how those same archetypes might manifest in storytelling.
Yes.
Like in myths and fairy tales.
Absolutely. Archetypes are the bedrock of storytelling.
Okay.
They provide those universal themes and characters that resonate across cultures and time periods.
So the classic hero's journey.
Classic. It's a story we see repeated in countless myths and legends. From ancient Greece to modern superhero movies.
Exactly.
And that's because it speaks to something deep within our collective unconscious. It reflects our shared human experience of facing challenges, overcoming obstacles, and ultimately striving for something greater than ourselves.
So these archetypes act like a universal language?
They do.
Helping us connect with stories and characters. Even if they come from different cultures or time periods.
They provide that common ground that transcends cultural boundaries.
This has been incredibly eye-opening.
It is.
I'm starting to see archetypes everywhere now.
Me too.
But before we move on,
okay,
I'm wondering if these archetypal patterns can change or evolve within an individual over time?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes.
Okay.
They absolutely can.
So it's not like we're stuck with one archetype forever?
No.
We can embody different archetypes at different times.
And that's actually a sign of healthy psychological development. Think about it.
Okay.
You might primarily embody the caregiver archetype at home, nurturing your family. But at work, you might step into the ruler archetype, taking charge, making decisions.
That makes perfect sense.
It's like having a whole cast of characters inside us, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, ready to take the stage when needed.
I love that analogy. And the more aware we become of those different archetypal energies within us, the better equipped we are to navigate different situations and relationships.
Absolutely.
So instead of feeling controlled by these unconscious patterns, we can start to understand them.
Yes.
And even leverage their strengths.
Exactly. It's like becoming the author of our own story, making conscious choices about how we express those archetypes.
In our lives.
In our lives, yes.
Okay, so how do we become more aware of these archetypes that play in our own lives?
Well, there are a few ways.
Okay.
One is to simply pay attention to your reactions in different situations.
Okay.
What triggers you? What makes you feel energized?
Okay.
What makes you feel drained?
Interesting. So our emotional responses can be clues to which archetypes are most active in a given moment.
Precisely.
You can also look at the people you admire.
Yes.
Or the characters that you're drawn to in stories.
Yes. What qualities do they embody?
Right.
Which archetypes do they resonate with?
So if I find myself constantly rooting for the underdog or the rebel in movies, that might tell me something about my own archetypal leanings.
Exactly. Those preferences can reveal a lot about the archetypes we resonate with.
Right.
And perhaps even those we need to develop further.
So speaking of development, we can't forget about the shadow side of archetypes.
The shadow.
The shadow side, what does that mean exactly?
Well, we all have archetypes that we're less comfortable with. The ones that represent our fears or our darker impulses.
Yeah.
Those aspects of ourselves that we might try to suppress or deny.
But you're saying that those shadow archetypes are important too.
Absolutely.
Okay,
They hold valuable lessons for us by acknowledging our shadow.
Okay.
We can start to integrate those energies in a healthier way.
Okay.
It's about embracing the full spectrum of our being.
Right.
Not just the parts that we deem desirable.
So it's like that saying, what we resist persists.
Exactly.
The more we try to ignore our shadow, the more power it has over us.
The more power it has.
Okay, so we've talked about recognizing our own archetypes, those of others. But how can understanding this concept help us navigate relationships more effectively?
That's a great question.
Yeah?
And it's one we'll explore in detail in the next part of our deep dive.
All right.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Jungian archetypes.
We're back.
Last time we discussed how these archetypes can manifest in areas like branding and culture.
Right.
And we even touched upon, the concept of the shadow self.
Yes. Fascinating stuff.
And now we're going to explore how understanding these archetypes can help us navigate our relationships more effectively.
Yes, our relationships.
This is something I think we can all relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do archetypes come into play in our interactions with others?
Well, one way is through attraction.
Okay.
We often gravitate towards people who embody archetypes that complement our own.
So if someone strongly identifies with, like, the caregiver archetype, they might be drawn to someone who embodies the hero or the ruler.
Right. Those archetypes seem to provide a sense of balance.
Yeah, because those pairings often create a sense of completion or wholeness.
Exactly.
Right. So the hero's strength might provide a sense of security for the caregiver, while the ruler's decisiveness might complement the caregiver's nurturing nature.
It's true.
But that can also lead to conflict.
Right. Of course.
If two people both embody very strong, dominant archetypes.
Right. They might clash.
Couldn't that clash?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For example, two rulers in a relationship might constantly butt heads.
Okay, yeah.
Each vying for control.
Right.
Or a rebel and a caregiver might struggle to understand each other's perspectives.
Right, because the rebel's need for change might clash with the caregiver's desire for stability.
Yes.
So how can we use this knowledge to actually improve our relationships?
I think the key is awareness.
Okay.
By recognizing these archetypal patterns, we can start to communicate more effectively and find ways to compromise.
Okay.
It's about understanding each other's motivations.
Yeah.
And finding a way to meet each other's needs.
It's like learning each other's love languages, but for archetypes.
I love that. And it's not just about romantic relationships. This applies to friendships, family dynamics, even workplace interactions.
So if you're feeling constantly frustrated by a coworker, maybe it's because you're clashing on an archetypal level.
It could be.
Like a citizen who values harmony might clash with a rebel who constantly pushes boundaries.
Exactly.
But once you understand that dynamic, you can find ways to work together more effectively.
Instead of butting heads, you can actually leverage each other's strengths.
Okay.
So the citizen's diplomacy could help the rebel's ideas gain wider acceptance. While the rebel's boldness could inspire the citizen to think outside the box.
So it's about recognizing that these differences aren't necessarily bad.
They're not.
They can actually be complementary if we approach them with understanding and a willingness to adapt.
Precisely. It's about finding that synergy.
Okay.
That sweet spot where those different energies can work together.
Harmoniously.
Harmoniously.
This has been such an insightful exploration of Jungian archetypes.
It has.
I feel like we've covered so much ground.
We have.
You know, from understanding those basic characteristics of each archetype to exploring how they influence our personal lives, our relationships, and even our culture.
It's amazing how these seemingly simple patterns can hold so much depth and complexity.
They really can.
And the more we understand them, the more we understand ourselves and the world around us.
So what's the next step for someone who wants to dive deeper into this topic?
Well, there are tons of resources available. Books, articles, online courses. You could even start by reading some of Jung's own work. Though it can be a bit dense.
Yeah, maybe start with Man and His Symbols.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's considered one of his most accessible works. And there are also, many contemporary authors who have written about Jungian archetypes in a more modern context.
Absolutely.
And of course, don't forget about self-reflection.
Paying
attention to your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own behaviors. Can be one of the most powerful ways to really explore those archetypal patterns.
It's an ongoing journey of discovery.
It is. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
A lot to think about.
Any final thoughts you'd like to leave them with?
Here's something to ponder. As technology advances and our society continues to evolve, how do you think these archetypes might change? Will new archetypes emerge? Or will existing ones simply take on new forms?
That's a fascinating question to consider.
It is.
It's a reminder that this exploration of Jungian archetypes isn't a destination. It's a journey.
It's a journey.
One that we're all on together. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for having me.